Not me, but a story passed on to me by my grandma about my now late aunt. In all seriousness, I think it was just a hell of a coincidence, but it's still pretty damn spooky. A bit of context: my aunt was an assistant costume designer for a lot of famous movies and Broadway productions. Casino with Robert De Niro, Marvin's Room with Leonardo DiCaprio, Ransom with Mel Gibson. She was the head of the puppet shop for the original Lion King musical, and I'm pretty sure she worked for the first production of Cats. So, to be clear, the costume design and everything that goes into the production of a major film or Broadway music is grueling, and there's a crazy drug culture that you're probably going to get sucked into. My aunt lost her sense of smell from drug use. It's bad. On to the story. Back in the 90s, my grandma went to New Orleans on vacation, and my aunt, ever the eccentric, asked her to bring back a dozen voodoo dolls. My grandma agreed. I believe she wanted to take home something as a souvenir for herself as well, and eventually she found herself touring one of the many little tourist trap museums in the city. The tour was fine, and she ended up in the gift shop, browsing their selection of dolls. Anyway, she looked at the tour guide and loudly announced that their selection of voodoo dolls was lousy and asked if they had anything better. Turns out they did. The tour guide led her into a back room where a couple of people were working on making the dolls. The selection back there, she said, was far superior to the ones in the front. The tour guide then asked what specifically she was looking for. My grandma said that she needed a dozen for my aunt, something for her to help her with the knee pain, which bothered her mostly at night, and then something to protect my uncle, who had recently taken to motorcycle riding. She wanted a good luck charm so he wouldn't get into a wreck. The tour guide provided. He gave her a dozen dolls, then a charm which he said would help with the knee pain. Just place it under your bed at night, and then a second charm for good luck. My uncle could hang on the handlebars of his motorcycle. So that was that. She went home, followed the directions. Her knee pain went away. My uncle thought it was silly but humored her by hanging up the charm, so to his credit, he never did get into a car accident. My money is just on the fact that the dolls worked as a placebo, or my grandma's knee pain was merely a temporary ailment that went away naturally, and my uncle was just a safe biker. But the real story is with the dozen she gave to my aunt. So at this point in time, my aunt had moved to Las Vegas to work on the film Casino, and she brought the dolls with her to hang up in the office. One of her coworkers took a liking to one of the dolls, which just so happened to also be my aunt's favorite. Eventually, the coworker asked if he could have the doll. My aunt shut that down real quick. Absolutely not. It was a present from her mom. It was hers, and not only that, it was also the best one of the bunch. She wasn't giving it away. He offered to buy it. No dice. He tried a few more times after this to convince my aunt to let him have the doll, but she remained firm. Then the doll went missing. It was pretty obvious what happened to it. The guy took it, and this was confirmed once his office was cleared out and they found it in one of the desk drawers. You see, the office had to be cleared because 3 days after the doll went missing, they found this coworker floating face down, dead in a pool. Now, I'm a skeptic. I don't believe in magic or ghosts. I don't even like astrology. I am the most mundane person you'll ever meet. If you ask me, I'd say it was a work party. They found drugs in his system. I expect he fell into the pool on a drug binge and drowned, and no one had found him until the next morning, but they were all either too high or too drunk themselves to notice. That being said, it is a little creepy, and I can't help but wonder if somehow that little voodoo doll tugged on his karmic strings so that maybe he took a little too much. Maybe he slept a little too close. Maybe, just maybe, in some weird, vague, and highly metaphysical way, it arranged for him to drown. Probably not, but still. Crazy. I was working at a hotel in Albuquerque, the graveyard shift. I had been talking to the security guard and then asked if I could get a ride home. So instead of waiting for 30 minutes for my shift to end, I just left and left a note for my boss. I said I left early because my brother was standing outside of town and needed me to get him. Total lie on my part, but I needed a good excuse to leave early. I drop off the security guard at his place and then go home and go to sleep. A couple of hours of sleep and I wake up to my phone ringing. It was my brother. He tells me he's stranded outside of town and needs me to get him. I tell my brother the lie I told my boss and how much of a coincidence he's calling me is. He says that's not weird. He's told me what's weird when I get there. I get there and ask him what's weird. He puts his phone to my ear and plays a message that he got when he woke up that morning. It was a voice that kind of sounded computerized, but mostly just creepy sounding. It says, "You're stuck." Freaked us both out. Never figured out where the call came from. Strangest, creepiest thing that's ever happened to me in my life. Neighbor's daughter is 4, has an invisible friend. Parents are told it's normal and play along. Little girl sometimes brings her mom her friend's scarf to watch with the white laundry. Her hands are empty, but she's holding up the pretend scarf. Mom plays along. Happens every other month for a few months. Girl can be found in a room talking to her friend. She calls him Charlie. Then the mom's father dies. They have tons of family and friends in town and decide to have a reception at their house. Mom goes into the attic to get all the old pictures of her dad, sets them all around the house. During the party, this little girl comes out of her room. As she's walking past the table, she stops and says, "Mommy, why do you have a picture of Charlie?" Mom says those pictures aren't Charlie, that's my dad. This particular table was full of pictures of her father during this time in the military. Little girl says, "No, that's Charlie," pointing to one of the specific photos on the back of the table. Mom picks up the picture and looks at the back. It's not her father, it's her grandfather. His middle name is Charles, and it's one of those pics where he's standing on the ladder of his fighter plane, wearing a white scarf. Mom swears the box was buried in the attic, undisturbed, and that the little girl was never up there alone. There's no way she could have seen that pic. There was a small door that led to the attic space in my room. 11 years old to 13, and it became the habit that I would shut the door as I walked into my bedroom a couple times a week. I didn't think anything of it, just assumed my mom didn't close it all the way when she left it. After a while, I made the mistake of joking with her when she made a comment about me not picking up after myself. I said something like, "Every night I have to close the door behind you. How about you shut it all the way when you're done?" She then informed me that she hasn't been in the attic for months. Asked my brother, nope. Asked my father, nope. So then I started to pay really close attention to it, making sure it was closed in the morning, checking it after school, checking after dinner, then heading up to bed and open. After a couple of months of wondering, studying, experimenting, I thought I'd see what happens if I just don't shut it. Opened the door before school and checked it out after school, still open. Checked it after dinner, still open. Before bed and still open. I'm lying in bed going crazy with the open door across the room. Decided to check it out, so I roll over and focus on the black space into the attic to see a face staring back at me. I bolt downstairs, I wake my parents, get ridiculed by my brother, switch bedrooms with my brother, move into a new house about 6 months later due to expanding household. New physics teacher and his wife bought our house. I could have forgotten all about it and even chalked it up to me having an overactive mind, but then my senior year I discovered how awesome our physics teacher was. Became my favorite class and by far my favorite teacher. End of the senior year, my friend and I took our VHS camcorder around town, doing mostly silly things, but then I took it to my old house to see what they've done with the place. We got a very fun tour. I got to tell stories about the projects my dad did and were still part of the house. Then the wife leads us upstairs to show us the sewing room. I asked jokingly, "Notice anything strange in this room?" And her face goes blank. On camera. She asks what I mean, and I try to shrug it off, but end up saying something about the attic door. She confirmed that every time she comes up to sew, the attic door is open. She then tells us that the second day of being at the house, their dog, German Shepherd, had gone into the room but would not go back downstairs. He started barking and could not be consoled, and then jumped through the window, landing on the tin roof over the porch and then running off. The dog has not come back until the next day and has not stepped foot into the hallway that leads upstairs since. I had the initial thought that I could show my parents and brother the story I had on film, but I decided to just let it be. I used to work doing maintenance at historic properties. There was a historic house museum I worked at when it wasn't open to the public. There was a visitor center with offices, and then the house was about half a mile up a dirt road in a wooden area. Sometimes I worked with the crew, but there were a lot of times I was there alone. One winter, when it was really cloudy and dark, I was working alone to get ready to replace some electric work on the exterior of the house. I went outside and turned off the circuit to the whole property and I tested it. It was off. I locked the doors and went outside to work. After about an hour, I got down from my ladder and started walking around the house. Then one of the flashlights inside the house turned on. I started to freak out and thought maybe someone was playing a joke on me. I called the visitor center on my walkie-talkie and confirmed that the only other person who was working that day was still there and hadn't left, and all the keys to the house were present and accounted for. That's when I freaked out and ran the half mile to the office. I made my coworker come back with me to check out what was going on, but when we got to the house, the light was off again, but the bulb was still warm. All the doors were still locked and the circuit was still off. Still gives me shivers to this day.